I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, a shocking display of anti-Semitism leads to violence in Virginia. Israel says goodbye to the oldest man in the world, and we'll reveal which American celebrity is making his way to Israel to help the U.S. government make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. The world is still reeling from the shocking display of hatred and anti-Semitism we saw this weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia. One of the biggest public gatherings of white supremacists in the United States in decades took place at the University of Virginia, leading to a tragic day of violence that has already claimed 3 American lives. But perhaps even more troubling than the Nazi flags we saw marching at the event was the American president's reluctance to condemn them. The American leader did condemn the violence, but not specifically the shows of anti-Semitism or racism.
But we're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country.
On many sides. These are the words chosen by President Trump to address the Nazi flags, anti-Semitic chants, and bloody rioting we've seen rampant in the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia over the last 24 hours. The governor of Virginia declared a state of emergency when the violence erupted and soon claimed the lives of 3 Americans. 2 of the victims were Lieutenant H.J. Conan and Trooper Pilot Burke M.M. Bates, whose police helicopter crashed while trying to control the riots. And the other was a 32-year-old woman who was protesting against the white supremacists. She was killed by 20-year-old James Alex Fields Jr., who intentionally rammed his car into a group of peaceful counter-protesters.
The car hit some people, and then it backed up so that it could gain momentum, so it could go faster, and it just smashed into dozens of people. There was at least a dozen people that were directly hit by the car. There was a girl that was on the ground who had been hit from the first time the car came, and 2 people were trying to pick her up because she couldn't move, and the car ran over her again.
Virginia police are still making arrests in the fallout of the day's tragic events, and the FBI has opened an investigation into exactly what went on. But many are pointing their fingers directly at a White House administration that seems reluctant to call out nationalist extremism and violence like this. Violence that in any other terms would be clearly denounced as terrorism. Luckily, it was Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe who said the words many needed to hear.
And I have a message to all the white supremacists and the Nazis who came into Charlottesville today. Our message is plain and simple. Go home. You are not wanted in this great Commonwealth. Shame on you. You pretend that you're patriots, but you are anything but a patriot.
All right, well, speaking of the White House has just announced that it will be sending Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and a team of negotiators to the Middle East to initiate renewed talks for the Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. Here to tell us more about this is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Now, Brett, what are the state of things now, and how realistic is this new push?
Well, obviously the U.S. has been behind the scenes for a lot of what's been going on in the Middle East as of late. But this is the Trump administration's first real efforts, their first real push to make a real peace process between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it comes at a really complicated time in the Middle East. Of course, that's nothing new.
Of course not. Well, and I know we've been seeing a lot of shifting, and changing alliances in the Arab world lately, which surely is going to play a major role in things, right?
Absolutely. Well, there's the Palestinian Authority and Hamas to consider because there's a potential unity deal on the table there. Relations between Israel and Jordan have been very strained since the incident at the embassy in Amman. And then, of course, the Palestinian Authority in Jordan just made a crisis committee to address the Israeli presence at the Temple Mount. But honestly, the biggest obstacle to peace talks like this might come from the Palestinian Authority itself, because Reports are now saying that President Abbas may refuse to do any negotiations with Israel at all as long as Netanyahu is under investigation, as we'll see in the report.
This is the Trump administration's first major push for a peace plan, and it comes with some complications. Things between Israel and the Palestinians were very heated last month, which saw the bloodiest crisis on the Temple Mount in years. Israeli-Jordanian relationships remain tense following the incident at the Israeli embassy in Amman, and while Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have open discussions for a unity government, President Abbas continues to deny financial aid to help the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Needless to say, these are difficult waters to navigate, especially for Kushner, who earlier this month confessed to a room of interns that, quote, there may be no solution to Israeli-Palestinian peace at all. On top of this, anonymous officials from the Palestinian Authority reportedly said that there will be no talks with Israel at all, not while Prime Minister Netanyahu is being investigated for corruption. The unnamed official allegedly told press that the PA, quote, didn't want the case of Omer, Israel's former prime minister, to repeat itself. We were on the verge of an agreement, and then he resigned, end quote. Indeed, former Israeli Prime Minister Omer did resign in 2008 after facing his own corruption scandals, after nearly clinching an historic peace deal with the Palestinians. But in President Trump's words, if Jared Kushner can't make peace, then no one can. Now it looks like we may be about to find out.
With another round of possible peace talks on the horizon, we can't help but ask, what are the chances? Well, the answer to that question is made even more complicated when you factor in the growing support for terrorism that's coming from Israel's Arab community. The Arab-Israeli village of Al-Fam is now notorious for this issue, especially since the 3 Israeli Arab teens who killed 2 police officers at the Temple Mount last month were from this very town. Joining us to discuss this issue is the former head of the Israeli Air Force Intelligence, Brigadier General Ram Shmueli. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so, we often hear the government attack the Palestinian Authority for incitement, the Israeli government attacking the Palestinian Authority. But what is Israel doing in terms of curbing incitement that we're seeing from within Israel?
People that do not know, we have 20% of the Israeli citizens are Arab Israelis. The vast majority of them are loyal. 95% of them are loyal to the State of Israel. The problem is the people that are the Islamic movement, especially in Al-Fahim, which is one of the biggest cities, the city where the killers came out from. And the Islamic movement, they use methods like incitement in kindergartens. They threaten the people, they cause fear among the people, and they inspire young people that they will have good will when they go to heaven.
Is Israel doing anything about this issue? Because you're talking a lot about the education here, right?
I think that we put this movement out of law. Nevertheless, they are still operating inside this village. So those young people that are inspired by the Islamic movement, some of them went out to Al-Aqsa, to the Temple Mount, and they think that they are going to do something in Al-Aqsa and they are going to be in heaven. This is what's happened. And this is something that Israel must fight against it. So
how does Israel do that? What is your take on this?
We have to take the 95% of the loyal people, and if they are playing according to the democratic rules, we have to give them all rights, and there are equal rights in the Israeli society. But the 5%, we have to treat them differently. We have to catch them. We have to give them the opportunity, whether you want to be loyal, or if you don't want to be loyal, you can go to the Palestinian Authority. We don't need people like you. So we have to do it very carefully. We have to go inside there, and we have to help the population to take those people out of them. For example, there is an election. The governor now is Khaled Akbaria. And if he is going to run to the next election with coalition with the Muslim movement, he should be turned off his job by the Israeli government. This is something that we have to do. So this is the stick.
Now, you spoke about the fact that the 95% of these Arab Israelis who are not, essentially condoning terrorism, we should be making sure that they have equal rights. Now, we are seeing that happen here, but at the same time, there is definitely a distinction in, the rates of crime within these villages. Poverty levels are much higher. Does Israel need to be tackling these social issues within these communities to help essentially stop more terrorism from taking place from within this community?
There is a lot of frustration.
Right.
this frustration among the population who are loyal, they don't know who to vote for. So, for example, they vote to the Arab United Party, which doesn't represent them, but they can't vote to a Zionist party like Likud.
So what is the answer there? What do you do for these people?
I think that there are three major steps that we have to choose. We have to build a strategic plan for the Arab-Israeli population, how we can help them to fight terror inside them, how we can help their education, the building house, which is very, and most of all, they have a lot of weapons inside the village. So we have to help them, strategic plan. Then we have to help the leader, the moderate leader, we have to support them. We have to give them some tools. And third, most important, we have to give them an horizon, political horizon. Nowadays, they don't have a kind of a regular, loyal Arab party. So you can say, why do I have to do it? The Arabs will do it. No, we have to help them. So the strategic plan to help this population, to make them feel that they are part of the Israeli society, and to fight very strongly against the people who are not loyal to the state of Israel, and we are not going to give them space to operate incitement and all those kind of fear in the society.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Brigadier General Ram Shmueli. All right, police have just apprehended a 29-year-old Palestinian woman, a mother of 5, who tried to stab and murder an ultra-Orthodox man near the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem. As you can see in this chilling video footage, the Palestinian woman, whose name is still under gag order by the police, crosses the street and attempts to stab an ultra-Orthodox man on the sidewalk. This corner you're seeing is near the old city's Damascus Gate, and it's the same street where 23-year-old Hadas Malka, an Israeli border police guard, was stabbed and murdered by a Palestinian terrorist just last June. The man you're seeing in this video was able to dodge his attacker's knife and escape, but what the video doesn't show is the woman running off and then randomly stabbing another man nearby. A man who it turns out wasn't even Jewish, but instead a Palestinian resident of East Jerusalem who happened to be wearing a shirt with Hebrew on it. The victim was wounded and taken to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem just before police subdued the Palestinian woman and booked her for questioning. Stabbing attacks like this have been on the rise since 2015, especially focused around the gates of Jerusalem's Old City, and have already claimed nearly 50 Israelis and 259 Palestinian lives, most of whom were killed while attempting to carry out terror attacks. Unfortunately, this is a difficult truth of the region, and tensions continue to remain high. Protests outside the home of Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit have continued this weekend. Just last night, a whopping 3,000 Israelis gathered to demand the indictment of Prime Minister Netanyahu on various corruption charges. Al TV's Aaron Porras has the story now. Aaron, take it away.
So as you said, 3,000 people have just have been protesting this past weekend in Petah Tikva against the Attorney General's handling of these cases and the lack of indictments. That part is not new. What is new is that the 3,000 protests is a massive increase since previous weeks, and this protest is basically an ongoing protest. It's been going on for months now.
What do you think that we can learn from that increase in size?
If nothing else, that despite the Likud's best efforts, this is just a few days after their rally, which they in turn brought 3,000 people to their rally here in Tel Aviv, but just a few days after that, to see an increase in the counter-protest would show that it's very much in line with recent polls that we've seen in the past, that 2/3 of Israelis want indictments, that at least half of the Israeli public believes that Netanyahu is being disingenuous when he's saying that he has absolutely nothing to do with the allegations. Now, facts about the allegations and actual charges, actual indictments, all of this has yet to come out. So far everything has been speculative. That's true, but we know where people stand, and so we're waiting to see what happens. I think we're going to keep seeing these protests until something happens.
Absolutely.
These protests at Mandelblit's home in Petah Tikva have been held every weekend for months, but this weekend saw a huge growth in the crowd size over last weekend, which saw substantial growth itself. Netanyahu is primarily involved in 2 cases, which, if they lead to indictments, could leave the prime minister facing multiple corruption charges. Last week, Wednesday, Netanyahu greeted a rally of 3,000 Likud supporters in Tel Aviv and levied a barrage of attacks against the media, accusing it of organizing a coup against the government. Anti-Netanyahu rallies like the one in Petah Tikva were also held this weekend in Jerusalem, Haifa, Beersheva, Ashdod, and Modi'in.
Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has made a controversial decision to silence critics of his government. He recently issued an official decree demanding that any online or social media users who, quote, harm the social fabric of the Palestinian Authority can be sent to jail anywhere from a year up to a full life sentence. And now it looks like the Palestinian president is under fire for arresting 5 Palestinian journalists, leading many to question the true extent of freedom of speech under the Palestinian Authority. The arrest of the 5 journalists is seen as a major move by President Abbas to censor critics of his government. Though official Palestinian Authority reports say the new decree mainly addresses hackers, it's now clear to many rights activists that freedom of expression is under direct attack in the Palestinian Authority. On top of the 5 arrests, Abbas's government has blocked 30 websites affiliated with the Palestinian president's 2 biggest rivals, political opponent Mohammed Dakhlan and his party's nemesis Hamas. Critics of Abbas's decree are attacking his purposely unclear wording, which leaves anyone making even casual social media comments open to imprisonment if the posts are found to be critical of government policy. This may be President Abbas's most open-faced attack on his dissenters, targeting anyone from journalists to teenagers. Conditions have been deteriorating worse than ever in Gaza, especially in this punishing summer climate. And now the United Nations is pointing fingers directly at Israel, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority, all for failing to properly address the crisis. Gaza has been facing a crippling energy crisis for months. The average resident of Gaza is given less than 6 hours of electricity a day, and sometimes as little as 4. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas began cutting payments to Gaza power companies back in April in a political move to put pressure on Hamas, who, of course, seized control of Gaza from Abbas's government back in 2007. And just last week, we revealed that President Abbas had also cut funds reserved for medical aid in Gaza, a move that was also denounced by the UN and the World Health Organization. For many, it's clear that Abbas is using the humanitarian crisis to his own political advantage and is worsening it until Hamas relents to his demands. But for the United Nations, Israel apparently still shares the blame.
The Israeli blockade and closure continue to disproportionately affect the civilian population and must be lifted. The recent measures to decrease the provision of electricity and to cut salaries and order early retirement of civil servants in Gaza are having a direct negative impact on the social and economic rights of Gazans. The lack of transparency in the use of resources and the continuing suppression of freedom of speech and assembly by the authorities in Gaza raise further concerns for the protection of fundamental rights.
Both Israel and Egypt maintain a blockade of Gaza for security reasons. Both countries view Hamas as a dangerous terror organization and a threat to stability in the region. Unfortunately, things will only continue to get worse in Gaza, at least until the Palestinian Authority and Hamas can come to an agreement that will resume proper financial aid to the citizens of the coastal enclave. Sadly, the summer heat isn't waiting for that deal to be made. One of Israel's top models has just been injured in a very serious accident. Joining us live from the streets of Tel Aviv is ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh with the scoop. Now, Emmanuel, tell us what happened.
Earlier today, international model Shlomit Malka fell off her electric scooter on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, where she sustained several injuries. Pedestrians said they found her unconscious on the ground. Magen David Adom took her to Ichilov Hospital, where she was in critical condition. Doctors say that now she is stable and at the ICU.
Now, Emmanuel, why is this such a big story here in Israel specifically?
Well, other than the fact that she is an international model, this accident actually speaks to a much larger issue here in Israel. The most common mode of transportation in Tel Aviv have been these electric bikes. In recent reports, it actually stated that over 120,000 bikes have been imported into the Holy Land. And let's face it, the benefits of these electric bikes are countless. There's no gas, it's good for the environment, they get you around Tel Aviv pretty quickly, so it's understandable that it's become such a large trend.
I mean, that sounds great, but what is the downside to these electric modes of transportation then?
Well, with the new trend becoming a must-have accessories, there have been a lot of accidents that have been reported due to the lack of regulation. They run red lights, they don't wear helmets, and there's not a lot of laws that are enforced to prevent these things.
Is there anything that's happening right now to deal with this issue?
Well, there are new reports saying that new safety measures are being implemented so that drivers of these electric bikes and scooters need to obtain a license and must be older than 16 to drive.
Well, we're all wishing for a speedy recovery for Maro Shlomit Malka and that nobody else ends up in this situation. Thanks for joining us, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Natasha.
All right, we have some very gloomy news today. At 113 years of age, Yisrael Crystal was both the world's oldest man and the world's oldest Holocaust survivor. But sadly, he passed away this weekend, just a few weeks short of his 114th birthday here in Israel. The world is mourning the passing of Yisrael, who made headlines last year when he was given a Guinness World Record for being the oldest man in the world. That was when he was 112, but Yisrael holds another distinction as well. He survived the Auschwitz concentration camp as a young man in Poland, and then immigrated to Israel in 1950, also making him the world's oldest Holocaust survivor in 2014.
His mother died when he was 7 years old, and his father was taken by the Russians as hostage in 1940, in the beginning of the First World War. And then he remained without parents, and he has to survive. I think this makes him very strong inside, and it helped him after it to pass other things, other severe things.
As a young man, Yisrael studied Judaism and Hebrew, but when World War I broke out, his studies were derailed. After the war, Yisrael developed his skills making candy and became a renowned confectioner up until the Nazis deported him and his wife to Auschwitz in 1944. Yisrael's wife perished in the camps, but Yisrael survived, and he reopened his candy business in Haifa after he resettled in Israel with his second wife, Batsheva. Although circumstances prevented him from celebrating his bar mitzvah when he was 13, Yisrael finally was able to celebrate a century later at age 113 near his home in Haifa. Yisrael leaves behind 9 grandchildren and will be missed dearly. All right. Someone get this man some sunscreen. Well, that's what we're about to hear because it looks like the rumors are true. Conan O'Brien is coming to Israel. The comedian and late-night host is continuing his Conan Without Borders campaign, this time trekking to the Holy Land to help none other than Jared Kushner and President Trump make peace in the Middle East. O'Brien confirmed the rumors himself with a tweet. Breaking, Conan O'Brien sends Conan O'Brien to Israel to help Jared Kushner. Stay tuned. Along with the hashtag Conan Without Borders and Conan Israel. He then linked to the announcement that President Trump was sending a Middle East envoy led by Jared Kushner in hopes of following through on his ultimate deal and landing peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Well, clearly this is a task O'Brien thinks could use his help. This will be the red-headed comedian's first trip to the Holy Land, and he plans to film in Israel for 5 days all over the country. Though the details are still under wraps, it looks like we'll be seeing a lot more shiny red hair here in Israel later this month.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We heard earlier of just how dangerous electric scooters and bicycles can be when you're zipping around the inner city. So today's word is kasda, meaning helmet. Now, of course, a kasda isn't only good for when you're riding your bike or skateboard. Athletes in many sports, from hockey to football to baseball, also wear kasdot, or helmets. And the research behind why is ample. So just remember that while helmets may not be the most stylish of things, a head of helmet hair is really a small price to pay for peace of mind.
The weather is brought to you by international singer-songwriter Sabina. Make sure to check out her latest album, Purple Ribbons, and get updated for upcoming concerts.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight is expected to be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is supposed to be sunny with a high around 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.58 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.